Was it difficult?
No, not at all. Not at all.
I am basically there to make money.
It all happened in the spring of 1992. At the time, George Soros saw that the British economy was dragging along many problems. They would end up affecting the pound, a scenario that he took advantage of by positioning himself against the pound. The result was that in a matter of months, Soros made profits of more than $1 billion, while the Bank of England saw the value of the pound fall, forcing the government to make the difficult decision to leave the European exchange rate system. The British Treasury estimated that the cost of Black Wednesday, the day the events took place, exceeded £3.3 billion, or about $10 billion in today's value.
This is the tale of how George Soros managed to put the Bank of England on her knees.
How did Soros, a one-man army, manage to put the Bank of England itself in check? Although, as you will see, it was far from being just one person, but let's take it one step at a time. We need to analyze the economic context in which the events unfolded. A context that led Soros to determine that the fall in value of the pound was inevitable. Sooner or later it was going to happen, and all the British currency needed was a little push to cause it to collapse. The UK was quite hesitant to join the newly created European exchange rate mechanism in the late 1980s, when the European Union was much smaller than it is today, with only 12 members. The exchange rate mechanism was an agreement established in 1979. In order to control the financial system and improve trade, its primary purpose was to regulate the exchange rates between the various currencies of the member nations of the European Club. At that time, all European countries were following the Deutsche Mark, the strongest currency in Europe and the world.
Financial Times of London saying he thought the Russian currency should be devalued by as much as 25%. A few words from Soros were enough to cause panic selling that fueled the crash.
And sometimes what I do has an unintended negative consequence, as it did in Russia.
The Bundesbank was calling the shots, which may have been the reason the UK decided to stay out of it. Initially, the fact is that the membership of the European exchange rate implied that participating governments had to follow a certain economic and monetary policy to prevent currencies from moving outside the fluctuation band in a way that if due to an excessive depreciation or appreciation, the currency approached the limits of that band, meaning that the authorities would be forced to intervene. As we have said, the United Kingdom officially remained outside this agreement, but the truth is that unofficially, its monetary policy largely followed the Bundesbank, and finally, in October 1990, a month before her resignation, Margaret Thatcher decided once and for all to join the European mechanism. Inflation in the UK was 3 times higher than in Germany. In 1989, exchange rates were much higher than usual. British labour productivity was still significantly lower than in France, let alone Germany, and a clear problem with the public deficit was beginning to emerge. To make matters worse, political tension was high, with a government that was essentially falling apart. All in all, we could say that the British economy had many more problems than it had advantages. And that put great pressure on the currencies included in the exchange rate mechanism that were trading close to the limiting support, as was the situation with the pound. The balloon was about to explode. In the play, Soros knew that the pound was clearly overvalued, not least because the UK central bank was maintaining very high interest rates, which ultimately hurt investment asset prices and local companies' ability to compete internationally. Additionally, with the economy already in recession and a significant erosion of the government's supper, Soros and his team of analysts recognized that this was unsustainable, and that sooner or later, the Bank of England will eventually lower interest rates, leading to the devaluation of the pound, which is exactly what happened.
Actually, President Mandela asked me, how could South Africa protect itself against speculators like you?
With the start of the 1990s, the Bank of England started to drastically lower interest rates, placing additional pressure on the exchange rate between the pound and other European currencies. This exchange rate was hardly able to be maintained within the specified range of fluctuation. For exactly this reason, during 1992, George Soros built up a huge short position against the pound, a position that could become very profitable if the British currency, which was sitting right on the edge, eventually broke the lower band. The trick is that, as you are all aware, a short position is when an investor bets against the value of a particular asset. There are a number of ways to take this position, but the most popular is to borrow the asset, in this case, pounds, and sell them in the market with the hope of buying them later on a cheaper price. The British government had to make a move. The Prime Minister at the time, John Major, forced the Bank of England to raise interest rates to 10%, and he authorised spending billions of dollars in foreign currency to buy sterling directly in the market. The influence of the pound, and avoiding having to leave the European exchange rate. Only 2 years after joining were at stake, but all efforts to maintain the pound's stability failed, as particularly George Soros grew increasingly his position against the British pound, making it decline even more. On September 16, the storm's epicenter arrived, and traders who had already taken short positions on the pound, including George Soros, started a massive sell-off. The Bank of England was forced to buy as much supply as possible, even going directly to the market. The British currency ended up piercing the agreed minimum exchange rate. But on the following day, a day that has gone down in history as Black Wednesday, the volume of sales was so great that the Bank of England was unable to compensate for all the supply.
As chairman of the Council of European Finance Ministers, I have called a meeting of the Monetary Committee in Brussels urgently tonight to consider how stability can be restored to the foreign exchange markets.
An attempt to calm the market, the Governor of the Bank of England announced an interest rate increase of 200 basis points to 12 points at midday. The move was a bluff that the market did not fall. At this point, the struggling British economy could not afford sustaining the prices. By this time, Soros had gone all in with a short position that's estimated to be worth more than $10 billion, equivalent to today's rate at $17 billion. Late in the evening of that fateful day, the British authorities were forced to accept the inevitable.
It has concluded that Britain's best interests are served by suspending our membership of the exchange rate mechanism.
In an effort to stop the pound from depreciating, they declared the end of the European exchange rate mechanism and acknowledged that the rate boost had only been temporary. However, sterling continued to decline, and within a few months, rates dropped below 7%. George Soros was correct. He managed to defeat the Bank of England itself, and the operation netted him $1 billion profit and catapulted him to the top of the pedestal of fame. Very soon we will talk in more details about Soros' entire financial career, so don't forget to subscribe and stay up to date. And of course, if you found this video interesting, don't forget to like it and drop a comment. See you in the next episode.